So we have Professor Dawn Sim joining us today. Hi, Dawn. Welcome. So Dawn is co-founder of MTHK, and today we're going to talk about menopause and dry eyes. So Dawn, does menopause affect your eyes?
I think it's a very short answer. If I'm just going to be straightforward, and it's a big yes. Menopause is a thing that happens to all of us in life. Well, half of us, the women. And menopause is a stage where there is large changes in the hormones in the body that have been used to those hormones for about 20, 30 years. And in that change, what it does is it affects all the different components that keep the eye comfortable and healthy. So the things that lubricate the eye, keeps it nice and wide, allows you to see clearly through those windows. And in those changes, the key thing really, I think, is the production of tears and the production of oils in the eyes that are important. So I like to liken menopause to puberty, as a time of change, slightly different in rates and in the balances of the hormones. But when you have those big shifts, it not only affects your mood, your hot flushes that we are all very aware of, and the mental health impacts of that. But with the eyes, it creeps up on you, and suddenly your eyes are no longer comfortable and you can't see as well. So menopause definitely affects the eyes.
Talking about menopause, there's a stage before that called perimenopause. Do you mind explaining what's the difference between perimenopause and menopause?
Perimenopause and menopause are distinct stages in a woman's life. Perimenopause tends to last a little bit longer as a transition phase. I liken it to my tweens, almost teenage years. That can start as early as 3 or 4, as we all know. But in this time, the changes are subtle to start with. But what you can do for eye health is execute kind of preventative measures at this early stage before the consequences of dry eye, in menopause ensues. And I think in perimenopause, the problem with that is very hard to identify when that is. Typically for women, it can happen as early as your early 40s, but in most people, it's in and around the late 40s time where perimenopause starts to occur.
With menopause, can you tell us exactly how does it affect the eyes? What does it do? And how do you feel?
With menopause and actually perimenopause, the first thing that people start to notice is discomfort in their eyes. So they might feel, it's a bit dry, or when it's a bit dry, it gets irritated. So it gets red, itchy, sore, watery. And that happens, even before menopause. If you're out late at night, you don't get enough sleep, you're in air conditioning. But in the perimenopause menopause stage, that becomes much more noticeable. And the problem with this is that it's not only uncomfortable, it affects your sight. So it affects how you work. And I mean, surprisingly, more than 80% of women don't know the eye symptoms are linked to menopause. And the impact of this is quite large. So more than half of women who take time off work can link some of their symptoms and reasons to this perimenopause stage. More so that we are in front of screens for many, many, many hours a day now. And it does impact, your productivity, just your general well-being. If you're not enjoying looking at a screen, not enjoying your work. So I think that's a key thing for the symptoms of eye health in a menopause stage. We can also talk about more serious things like infections in the eyes, which is also a consequence of dry eyes or eyes being inflamed or irritated. So the risk of eye infections are higher. You can notice more floaters as well. You might notice some flashing lights in the eyes. So again, it's the experience of your visual kind of world that can drastically change. And let's not even go into presbyopia, which is, hits everyone, not just women.
And with these symptoms, any suggestions or any advice on how we can manage the symptoms?
Yes, it's an old adage, like prevention is better than cure. Moisturize, moisturize, moisturize. We moisturize our skin from, from our teenage years in our 20s, but we don't take care of our eyes. And it's also a surface, but a much more complex surface, arguably, than skin. The skin differs everywhere in the body, but the eyes, similar to how the skin in your face is different from the skin in your arm, there are different bits of the eyes that you need to keep lubricated. And we have our lids that help us spread this lubrication around. But as menopause ensues, we just don't produce enough tears and oils to be able to keep it as healthy as it was before. So moisturizing regularly, using eye drop sprays, supplementing, especially when you're working in front of the screen or you're in air conditioning, which I am right now, it's utmost, I think. So the other things you can do for your eyes, I think are very pragmatic. Taking a regular eye test once a year is really important once you're past 40. So an optician or an eye doctor should check your eyes once a year. A good kind of, if you think of mental health, so anything that gives you good mental health gives you good eye health. So getting more rest, being in a less stressful environment. But one of the main modifying things we can do for our eye health is to make sure we have an adequate diet that produces the vitamins and the oils that we require to make good tears. So, for example, foods such as oily fish, nuts, seeds, eggs, dark green leafy vegetables not only have nutrients, but they contain pigments that our body cannot make themselves, that deposit in the eye. It not only helps with how you feel about your eyes, but also how you see, because the film behind the eye that receives all the light and makes the picture that we perceive in our brain requires certain pigments in the eyes that we just can't produce ourselves. So I think a general overall well-being practices also apply to our eye health. But the two things I think that are modifiable and have the greatest impact are to make sure we moisturize our eyes from external, and to make sure we eat well, and to have sufficient supplements to ensure we see well.